Welcome to the Growth Room. Today we're exploring one of the most influential entrepreneurship books ever written, 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel and Blake Masters. In this audiobook summary, you'll discover why the greatest businesses don't simply compete. They create something entirely new, and how innovative thinking can help shape the future. To understand why this book completely disrupted the startup world, we first need to look at the minds behind it. Peter Thiel isn't just an armchair philosopher. He's a billionaire venture capitalist who co-founded PayPal and Palantir and was the very first outside investor in Facebook. He's a man who has built his career on spotting hidden value long before anyone else. Blake Masters, his co-author, was a student at Stanford Law School when he took meticulous notes during Thiel's 2012 class on startups. Those notes became an internet sensation, floating around Silicon Valley like an underground manifesto, eventually evolving into the book we are diving into today. So, why did 0 to 1 become a modern business Bible? It's because it challenges almost every piece of conventional wisdom taught in business schools. Most business books tell you how to optimize what already exists. Thiel tells you that if you are copying someone else, you aren't learning from them. At the absolute core of this philosophy is a simple, elegant mental model: the difference between horizontal and vertical progress. Imagine an XY axis. Horizontal progress is moving along the x-axis. It means going from 1 to n. This is globalization. It's taking something that works in one place and making it work everywhere. If you see a successful boba tea shop in one city and open a similar one in your hometown, you are making horizontal progress. You are adding to the quantity of existing things. It's essential for spreading wealth, but it doesn't create a new future. Vertical progress, on the other hand, is moving up the y-axis. It means going from 0 to 1. This is technology. It means creating something that has never existed before. When the world went from horse-drawn carriages to the internal combustion engine, that was 0 to 1. In our modern landscape, when we shifted from standard search directories to Google's PageRank algorithm, or more recently, from standard predictive text to OpenAI's generative language models, those were massive 0 to 1 leaps. Going from 0 to 1 is incredibly difficult because you are operating in total uncertainty, but it is the only way to generate true monumental value. Part 1. Thinking differently. Thiel likes to open interviews and investment pitches with a famously jarring question: what important truth do very few people agree with you on? It sounds simple, but it's a psychological trap. Most people answer with a popular consensus dressed up as an original thought, like, our educational system is broken, or climate change is a crisis. But a true answer to this question must be counterintuitive, unpopular, and intellectually lonely. It requires you to look at the world around you and see a massive blind spot that everyone else is ignoring. This brings us to a fundamental realization: the future is something we actively create, not something we merely discover. Thiel argues there are two ways to look at the future: indefinitely or definitely. If you view the future indefinitely, you treat it as a matter of chance. You diversify your portfolio, you gather data, you look at trends, and you hope you get lucky. This is how modern corporate structures and copycat businesses operate. They wait to see what works for someone else, and then try to do it 5% better. But if you view the future definitely, you treat it as something you can map out and build through conviction. You don't wait for trends, you set a vision. Think of Elon Musk launching SpaceX. In the early 2000s, the consensus was that private space travel was a multi-billion-dollar money pit. Musk had a definite view of the future, that humanity must become multi-planetary, and reverse engineer the engineering and financial steps required to make it happen. He didn't look at what the market was doing. He looked at physics and what could be done. To think like a 0 to 1 founder, you have to look for secrets. Thiel believes that the world still holds deep, undiscovered truths about nature, people, and business. Conventional wisdom says that all the good ideas are taken, which lead to a culture of hyper-competition where software developers, content creators, and corporate professionals battle over tiny scraps of market share. If you assume there are no secrets left to find, you will never look for them, and you will restrict yourself to the safe, crowded space of 1 to N imitation. But if you assume secrets exist, you start asking better questions. You look at industries that are stagnant, inefficient, or blinded by dogma, and you find the massive gaps in reality that others are too comfortable to notice. Independent thinking isn't about being contrarian just for the sake of being difficult. It's about having the courage to see reality clearly, unblind by the crowd. When the dot-com crash happened in March 2000, the entire tech industry panicked and adopted a set of lessons that Thiel argues were completely wrong. The crowd decided that small, incremental steps were safer than bold visions, that planning is arrogant, and you should just iterate flexibly, and that you should focus on improving existing products rather than creating new markets. Thiel challenges every single one of these post-crash dogmas. He asserts that a bold plan is always better than no plan, that bad plans are better than no plans at all, that competitive markets destroy profits, and that sales and distribution matter just as much as the product itself. To responsibly apply this today, look at the explosive rise of AI builders and product managers. The modern temptation is to build a wrapper around an existing AI model, launch it quickly, and try to outmarket 1,000 identical copycats. That is horizontal thinking. The definite, vertical approach is to ask, what unique problem in medicine, logistics, or heavy manufacturing can only be solved if we rethink the data pipeline from absolute scratch? When you stop looking at your competitors and start looking at the unaddressed problem, you shift your entire psychological framework. You stop trying to win a game that someone else designed, and you start building a new game where you set the rules. Part 2. The power of monopolies. To understand why the 0 to 1 framework is so powerful, we have to look at the most controversial and misunderstood concept in the entire book, Thiel's theory of monopoly. In standard economics classes, we are taught that perfect competition is the ideal state for a healthy economy. In a perfectly competitive market, no single business has market power. Products are largely identical, barriers to entry are low, and supply and demand perfectly balance out. Economists love this because it's easy to model mathematically. But Thiel makes a startling claim. Perfect competition is a trap that destroys all profits. When you operate in a perfectly competitive market, you are selling a commodity. Think of a local coffee shop, a generic clothing brand, or a freelance graphic design business. Because anyone can open a similar business, competition forces prices down to the point where your profit margins approach 0. You spend all your time and energy just scraping by, reacting to your competitors' prices, and struggling to survive. In this ecosystem, you have no capital to invest in long-term innovation, research and development, or employee well-being. The alternative, and the goal of every truly great business, is a creative monopoly. Now, let's be very clear here. Thiel is not talking about illegal, predatory monopolies like a utility company that gets a government backstop to bully customers and jack up prices for a terrible service. That is an unhealthy monopoly. A creative monopoly is a business that is so devastatingly good at what it does that no other company can even offer a close substitute. It doesn't achieve dominance by locking people in illegally. It achieves dominance by creating massive, unprecedented value. It goes from 0 to 1, creates a brand new category, and reaps the immense financial rewards of being the undisputed ruler of that new kingdom. Look at Google. For decades, Google has been the definitive, unchallenged king of search. Because it operates as a creative monopoly in search advertising, it generates tens of billions of dollars in pure profit every single year. And because it doesn't have to constantly panic about a competitor undercutting its core business by 2%, it has the financial freedom to fund incredibly ambitious, long-term vertical projects. It can build autonomous vehicles, fund advanced health longevity research, map the entire physical world, and invest deeply in artificial intelligence infrastructure. Creative monopolies give customers choices by adding entirely new categories to the world. Competitive businesses give customers identical choices while draining their own lifeblood. An incredibly fascinating psychological phenomenon happens here, and it's something every startup founder product manager and business owner needs to understand. Monopolies and competitive businesses both lie about their true nature. Because monopolies don't want to invite government regulation, antitrust lawsuits, or public backlash, they do everything they can to hide their monopoly status. How do they do this? By defining their market as broadly as possible. Google doesn't call itself a search engine. It calls itself an information services company or a global advertising platform. By blending into a multi-trillion-dollar macroeconomic category that includes everything from television ads to billboards, it looks like a tiny player fighting for a sliver of the market. Conversely, non-monopoly businesses that are trapped in brutal competition do the exact opposite. They want to look unique and attractive to investors, so they define their market as narrowly as possible. A founder might say, "We are the only premium organic pet food delivery service exclusively targeting French bulldog owners in downtown Chicago." That might technically be true, but it's a meaningless distinction. They're still competing against every other dog food brand, grocery store, and e-commerce giant on Earth. They are hallucinating a monopoly that doesn't exist. So, how do you actually build a business that achieves a sustainable competitive advantage and reaches that coveted monopoly status? Thiel outlines 4 core characteristics that define almost every successful creative monopoly. Proprietary technology. Your technology must be significantly better than the next best alternative. Thiel's benchmark is a literal 10x improvement. If your software or product is only 10% or 20% better, it will be viewed as an incremental upgrade, and the friction of switching will prevent customers from adopting it. But when Google launched PageRank, it didn't just index keywords slightly better than Yahoo or AltaVista. It returned results that were dramatically more relevant. It was a 10x leap. In today's landscape, look at how NVIDIA's specialized hardware and CUDA ecosystem provided a massive 10x processing advantage for training large AI models compared to traditional CPUs. Network effects. This means your product becomes inherently more valuable as more people use it. Think of Airbnb. If you're the only host on the platform, it's useless. But as millions of hosts list their properties, the platform becomes irresistible to travelers. And as millions of travelers flock to the app, it becomes the only logical place for hosts to list. This creates a powerful, self-reinforcing loop. However, the secret to unleashing network effects is that you must always start in a tiny, hyper-specific market. Facebook didn't launch to the entire world on day one. It launched exclusively to Harvard students. Economies of scale. A great monopoly business gets structurally stronger as it grows. In traditional brick-and-mortar businesses, like a yoga studio, scaling requires hiring more instructors and renting more real estate. Your fixed costs grow alongside your revenue. But in a software-driven monopoly, the marginal cost of reproducing the product is virtually zero. Once OpenAI spends hundreds of millions of dollars training a baseline model, serving that model via an API to the next million users costs a fraction of a cent. The profit margins expand dramatically with scale. Branding. A strong brand creates an emotional and psychological moat that is incredibly difficult for competitors to cross. Look at Apple. From the hardware design to the ecosystem integration, the software interface, and the retail stores, Apple has crafted a brand identity that signals premium quality and design philosophy. Competitors can try to match the raw hardware specifications of an iPhone or a MacBook, often for a lower price, but they cannot replicate the Apple brand equity. However, Thiel warns that branding alone is a shallow strategy. If you try to build a brand without a core 10x proprietary technology underneath it, your business will eventually collapse under the weight of its own marketing hype. When you look at these 4 characteristics, you realize that building a startup isn't about entering a big market and trying to capture 1% of it. That is a classic business school mistake that leads to instant death by competition. The responsible, modern application of this principle is to find a micro market that you can completely dominate from day one. Become a monopoly of a tiny pond, perfect your proprietary technology, harness your initial network effects, and only then expand outward into broader, adjacent markets. Part 3. Building a great startup. Now that we understand the strategic necessity of creating a monopoly, the big question is, how do you actually build one from scratch? Thiel lays out a very clear path, and it begins with how you choose to solve problems. A classic mistake made by many modern entrepreneurs, especially software developers and product managers, is falling in love with a solution rather than a problem. This is called technology looking for a use case. You build a highly sophisticated AI tool or a beautiful app simply because you have the technical capability to do so, and then you go hunting for customers who might want it. This almost always leads to a painful realization that you've built something nobody actually needs. To achieve true product-market fit, the point where your solution perfectly aligns with a burning market demand, you have to start by solving important, deeply felt problems. The best startups don't solve problems that everyone is already talking about. They solve problems that are glaringly obvious in hindsight, but are being completely overlooked in the present. Look at Stripe. Before Stripe existed, accepting payments on the internet was a nightmare. Developers had to jump through endless regulatory hoops, deal with legacy banking infrastructure, and write thousands of lines of messy code just to set up a basic merchant account. The collision of technology and finance was broken. The Collison brothers didn't try to build a slightly prettier dashboard for existing banks. They went from 0 to 1 by creating a clean, elegant API that allowed any developer to safely accept global payments with just 7 lines of code. They solved a massive, painful infrastructure problem, and in doing so, unlocked an entire generation of new internet businesses. Once you identify a meaningful problem, your goal is to build a unique solution that creates an immediate 10x advantage. This requires a ruthless focus on long-term vision over short-term optimization. In today's fast-paced business culture, founders are often told to embrace the lean startup methodology. While iteration and gathering data are important, Thiel warns that over-relying on it can destroy your long-term potential. If you only make minor, incremental changes based on what users tell you today, you will never build a radically transformative future. You will iterate yourself into a local maximum, a slightly better version of a fundamentally limited idea. To create a massive breakthrough, you need a definite plan for where your product should be 5, 10, or 20 years from now. Think of Apple's rollout of its ecosystem. The iPod wasn't just a music player. It was the Trojan horse that established the iTunes ecosystem. That ecosystem laid the groundwork for the iPhone, which then paved the way for the App Store, the iPad, the Apple Watch, and Apple services. Every single step was part of a grand, cascading vision to capture and hold long-term value. To execute this responsibly in today's crowded markets, you must use what Thiel calls the practical startup framework. It's a sequence that protects you from being crushed by massive incumbents before you've even had a chance to walk. Find a meaningful, unaddressed problem. Look for the inefficiencies or gaps that others are ignoring. Build a 10x unique solution. Create a product that is vastly superior to any existing alternative for a specific use case. Dominate a small, loyal market. Find a tiny niche of users who absolutely love your product because it solves their specific pain point perfectly. Secure this territory completely. Scale strategically. Once you have a monopoly in your tiny niche, systematically expand into adjacent markets that can leverage your existing technology, brand, and network effects. Look at how Amazon executed this masterfully. Jeff Bezos didn't launch the everything store on day one. If he had tried to sell electronics, clothes, furniture, and toys all at once in 1995, Amazon would have been crushed by existing retail giants and supply chain complexities. Instead, Bezos chose a very specific, small market: books. Books were easy to ship, didn't spoil, and had a massive catalog of titles that no physical bookstore could ever fully stock. Amazon became the undisputed monopoly of online book sales. Only after mastering that specific supply chain, building a massive customer base, and creating a trusted brand did Bezos strategically scale outward into CDs, DVDs, electronics, and eventually everything else. The lesson here for students, content creators, and aspiring entrepreneurs is clear. stop trying to conquer the ocean on your first day. If you're launching a new newsletter, don't make it about general business advice. Make it about AI automation tools specifically for independent real estate agents. Win that tiny room completely. When those agents can't live without your insights, you've achieved your initial 0 to 1 moment. From there, you have a solid foundation to scale into broader territories. Part 4. Founders and teams. If the core of a startup is its long-term vision, the engine that executes that vision is the team. Thiel has a famous saying in Silicon Valley, Thiel's Law. It states that a startup messed up at its foundation cannot be fixed. When a company is founded, the very first choice is made. The co-founders chosen, the initial equity split, the early hires, set a structural trajectory that is almost impossible to alter later on. If you get the foundation wrong, the company will eventually collapse under the weight of internal conflict, no matter how great your proprietary technology might be. The absolute first step in building a rock-solid foundation is choosing your co-founders responsibly. Thiel argues that co-founders should have a deep prehistory together before they ever launch a company. Starting a business with someone is a high-stakes, high-stress psychological marriage. If you meet someone at a casual networking event and decide to launch a startup together the following week, just because your resumes match, you're taking a massive, reckless gamble. When things get incredibly difficult, and they always do, minor misalignments in values, work ethic, or vision will blow up into catastrophic boardroom wars. To prevent these internal fractures, a founder must clearly structure and distinguish 3 separate dimensions of organizational alignment. Ownership. Who legally owns the shares of the company? Founders, investors, employees. Possession. Who actually runs the company day to day? The CEO and the operational team. Control. Who formally governs the company's big picture direction? The board of directors. In a tiny startup, the founders usually occupy all 3 categories simultaneously. But as a company scales and raises capital, these roles begin to separate. Investors take pieces of ownership and seats on the board of control, while professional managers might take over possession. Thiel warns that misalignment between these groups is a primary source of startup death. For instance, a board of directors that wants short-term profits might clash with a founder who wants to reinvest every dollar into long-term vertical R&D. To fix this, Thiel advises keeping the board small, no more than 3 to 5 people, so decisions can be made quickly and cohesively. This brings us to company culture. A lot of modern businesses mistake culture for superficial perks. They think that putting a ping-pong table in the office, offering free kombucha on tap, or having a casual dress code means they have a great culture. Thiel completely rejects this. Company culture isn't a collection of perks. Culture is the unique way an organization works together, and it is defined by what the team believes on an internal, psychological level. To build a legendary culture, your early team shouldn't just be a random collection of talented individuals. They should look like a highly functional, mission-driven unit. Thiel notes that at PayPal, the early team was so tightly knit that the press eventually dubbed them the PayPal Mafia because they went on to found or fund YouTube, Tesla, SpaceX, LinkedIn, Yelp, and Palantir. They weren't just co-workers. They were friends who shared a radical, obsessive worldview about the future of digital currency. When hiring talented people, you should actively avoid the corporate trap of hiring people who just want a prestigious line item on their resume. If someone asks you, how much will my equity be worth in 2 years? Or what are your office perks? They are thinking like a mercenary. You want missionaries. To attract missionaries, you need to answer 2 specific questions that no other company can answer. Why is your mission unique and important? Why is your team the only group capable of achieving it? If you can explain why your 0 to 1 vision is the only way to solve a burning, meaningful problem, the most talented engineering minds and product managers will choose to work for you over a massive corporate incumbent, even if you pay them less cash. Furthermore, Thiel introduces a highly unconventional rule for internal leadership and team management. Every single person in the company should be responsible for doing exactly one thing. In many early-stage startups, roles are deliberately fluid. Everyone does a little bit of marketing, a little bit of coding, and a little bit of sales. While this sounds collaborative and agile, Thiel argues it actually breeds extreme internal friction. When roles overlap, people naturally compete for status, visibility, and control over the most exciting tasks. By assigning every individual one definitive, distinct responsibility, you eliminate workplace politics. If an employee's performance is struggling, you know exactly who is accountable. More importantly, it gives every team member absolute autonomy and psychological safety over their specific domain, allowing them to focus entirely on execution rather than internal rivalries. Part 5. Sales and Distribution. One of the most dangerous myths in Silicon Valley and the broader tech world is the idea that if you build a truly incredible product, the world will automatically beat a path to your door. This is the product-first delusion. Engineers, software developers, and product managers love this idea because it means they can stay comfortably in their offices, focus entirely on writing code or designing features, and completely ignore the messy, unpredictable world of human psychology and sales. Thiel completely obliterates this mindset. He makes a definitive assertion. Distribution is not an afterthought. It is a core part of the product itself. Even if your product is a 10x technical marvel, if you don't have an effective way to get it into the hands of customers, your business will fail. Customers will not manifest out of thin air. To understand distribution responsibly, you have to look past the superficial marketing buzzwords and analyze the raw unit economics of your business. Thiel introduces 2 vital metrics that every entrepreneur, content creator, and business owner must master: customer acquisition cost, CAC, and lifetime value, LTV. Customer acquisition cost, CAC, the total amount of money you spend on marketing, sales, and advertising to win a single new customer. Lifetime value, LTV, the total net profit that a single customer will generate for your business over the entire duration of their relationship with you. For any business to survive and scale strategically, your LTV must be significantly greater than your CAC. If it costs you $100 in social media ads to get a user to buy a $20 subscription and they cancel after 1 month, you are bleeding money into a vacuum. Thiel maps out a clear distribution spectrum based on these metrics. At the high end, you have complex sales, where a single deal is worth millions of dollars, like Palantir selling enterprise data software to governments. Here, you don't use online ads. You use the CEO's personal relationships to close a few massive deals a year. At the low end, you have marketing and advertising, where you sell low-price consumer products to millions of people using viral campaigns or search ads. The absolute dead zone of distribution, where countless startups go to die, is the middle. If your product costs around $1,000, it's too cheap to justify hiring a dedicated sales team to go out and meet clients, but it's too expensive for a customer to just click an Instagram ad and buy it on a whim. If you find yourself in this distribution dead zone, you must actively pivot your product or pricing structure to escape it. A critical superpower within distribution is the cultivation of network effects and virality. A viral product is one whose core functionality encourages users to invite other users naturally. Look at Airbnb or Dropbox. When Dropbox first launched, they didn't just spend millions on Google AdWords. Instead, they pioneered a simple, viral referral loop. If you invited a friend to join Dropbox, both you and your friend received 500 megabytes of free cloud storage space for life. The distribution mechanism was beautifully woven directly into the product experience itself. It felt like a generous gift, not an annoying sales pitch, causing the user base to explode exponentially. Part 6. The 7 questions every startup should answer. As we approach the ultimate synthesis of Thiel's startup philosophy, he provides us with a brutal, uncompromising diagnostic checklist. Every single founder, AI builder, or product manager who wants to go from 0 to 1 must be able to answer these 7 foundational questions with absolute clarity. If you can answer all 7, you will build a creative monopoly. If you fail even 2 or 3 of them, your business will likely join the graveyard of forgotten startups. Let's break down each question in detail. 1. The engineering question. Can you create a breakthrough technology instead of an incremental improvement? As we discussed, your solution cannot just be 10% or 20% better than what currently exists. It must be a 10x leap. It must look so drastically superior that the choice to switch becomes an absolute no-brainer for your target audience. 2. The timing question. Is now the right time to start this specific business? You need to look closely at the cultural, technological, and regulatory landscape. Are you launching a product into a stagnant, dying market? Or are you riding the absolute crest of a monumental structural shift? Think of how YouTube launched right when high-speed broadband internet became mainstream and Adobe Flash made video streaming frictionless. A few years earlier, and the infrastructure wouldn't have supported it. 3. The monopoly question. Are you starting with a big share of a small market? Are you making the classic business school error of entering a massive, multi-billion-dollar market, hoping to win 1% of it? Or are you responsibly targeting a hyper-focused, unserved niche that you can completely dominate and lock down on day one? For the people question, do you have the right team to execute your vision? Are your co-founders chosen based on a deep, trusted prehistory? Are your early hires missionaries who are deeply obsessed with your unique 0 to 1 vision? Or are they mercenaries just looking for a paycheck and office perks? 5. The distribution question. Do you have a clear plan to not just create, but deliver your product? Have you mapped out your LTV and your CAC? Do you know exactly how your product will travel from your mind into the actual daily lives of your users? Or are you just praying that if we build it, they will come? 6. The durability question. Will your market position be defensible 10 and 20 years from now? Many businesses look highly profitable in their first year, but are easily disrupted because they have no structural moats. You must ask yourself, as we scale, will our network effects grow stronger? Will our economies of scale expand? And will our proprietary technology remain uncopyable? Look at how NVIDIA built its CUDA software platform alongside its chips, making it incredibly painful for developers to switch to any rival hardware. 7. The secret question. Have you identified a unique truth that others don't see? Are you simply building a copycat business based on visible, popular trends? Or have you looked deeply into an industry, found a massive blind spot, and uncovered a secret that forms the entire foundation of your competitive advantage? Part 7. The future. As we look toward the horizon, the final layer of Peter Thiel's philosophy moves away from immediate corporate tactics and expands into a massive, existential look at human civilization. Thiel outlines 4 macroeconomic paths that humanity could take. The first is collapse, a catastrophic event that destroys global infrastructure. The second is plateau, a state where developing nations catch up to the developed world, but innovation stalls completely, leading to resource wars. The third is extinction, where our own technologies turn against us. The final, ideal path is singularity, a state of accelerating vertical progress where we build an entirely new, radically abundant future. To reach that singularity, we must apply the 0 to 1 mindset to the grandest challenges of our time. In today's landscape, look at the staggering rise of AI builders. The horizontal approach is using artificial intelligence to automate minor corporate tasks or write generic marketing copy. The vertical approach, the 0 to 1 leap, is what companies like OpenAI, NVIDIA, and deep tech biotech startups are doing, completely redefining how we discover life-saving medicines, simulate quantum physics, or manage global logistics networks. Similarly, in clean energy and space technology, companies like Tesla and SpaceX prove that long-term, capital-intensive vertical visions can work if they are executed with absolute engineering discipline. The future of entrepreneurship belongs to those who look past short-term financial engineering and dare to build physical and digital systems that feel like magic to the previous generation. Final summary and action plan. Let's distill everything we have covered into a definitive, actionable recap. The biggest lesson from 0 to 1 is that competition is a direct destroyer of value. When you compete, you fight over pieces of a pre-existing pie. When you create a monopoly, you bake an entirely new pie from scratch. The complete 0 to 1 framework. 1. Uncover a secret. Find an important truth or a massive blind spot that very few people agree with you on. 2. Target a micro-market. Find a tiny, specific pool of passionate users and dominate that room completely. 3. Build a 10x lead. Ensure your proprietary technology is dramatically superior to the next best alternative. 4. Lock in structural moats. Layer on network effects, economies of scale, and an authentic brand identity as you scale. 5. Master your distribution. Weave your customer acquisition strategy directly into the product lifecycle. Common startup mistakes to avoid. The 1% fallacy. Trying to capture 1% of a massive, multi-billion-dollar market rather than 80% of a tiny niche. Mercenary hiring. Building a team out of people who care about perks and status rather than the core mission. The product-first illusion. Believing that a great product replaces the need for a brilliant sales and distribution plan. Thank you so much for listening to this complete audiobook summary. If you want to continue mastering the mental models, startup strategies, and psychological frameworks that build real wealth and drive human progress, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below with the biggest secret you've noticed in your industry. Welcome to the Growth Room. This channel is your dedicated laboratory for exploring the world's most powerful books on entrepreneurship, startups, innovation, productivity, wealth creation, and personal growth. We don't just summarize chapters. We dissect the actionable blueprints you need to rewrite your reality. Remember, the world doesn't need another copycat business, another generic portfolio, or another person waiting for trends to tell them what to do. The future isn't a pre-written script that you merely walk into. It is a blank canvas waiting for your conviction. Stop looking at what everyone else is doing. Find your secret, gather your mission-driven team, build your 10x solution, and go take your world from 0 to 1. We'll see you in the next episode of Growth Room.